recently there was a hearing where the lead investigator from the Ponzi scheme kind of spoke briefly about this. So this is the information that I'm giving is from his testimony. So essentially what happened is Michael Cochran, Natalie's husband, died February 19th, 2021. About a week or two before that he died, Michael and Natalie were supposed to get on an airplane and go to Virginia to go to, I think, Bank of America, to one of their banks to kind of look at the funds and things like that. And the impression that the investigator got was that this is when Michael was starting to get suspicious of the money, whether or not it was actually coming in, whether or not everything was true. So the morning that they're supposed to go to Virginia, Natalie cancels the flight. She texts, they were supposed to fly out of the Beckley-Raleigh County Airport, but she texts the pilot and says, we can't go. Michael finds out, is livid, and is like, you need to reschedule this, or like me and my friend, Chris Davis, are going to go instead. So that kind of, I guess, was like the first window into like maybe like Michael was getting suspicious of Natalie and everything going on. And so then that same day, Michael falls ill. The investigator didn't give a timeline of how that happened, at what point he fell ill, but he's sick. And Natalie is helping him get some medication to treat it. And then she's also texting one of her friends saying, hey, like, my husband's sick. Like, could you come over and bring like some drinks? And also, by the way, I've been sick from cancer treatment, and my doctor says that insulin would help treat some of my symptoms, but I can't get that prescription yet. And the person she's texting is the wife of Chris Davis, Jennifer. And she's like, oh, well, my son has insulin. He's, I think, diabetic. So like, we can help you out with that. So that's where like the insulin, which is being alleged as like the murder weapon, comes into play.
Gotcha. And there are, there's documented evidence of these text messages.
Yeah. So that's what the investigator was citing when he was giving his testimony, was these text messages that he had obtained from Natalie to Jennifer and from Michael to Natalie.
Gotcha. How close was that to that flight?
It was that day. So this all happened within a day. So the same day that they're supposed to take a flight to Virginia is the same day that he gets sick and that Natalie is essentially asking for insulin from her friend.
Okay, gotcha. So the timing is off. And I guess let's go ahead and lay out, does Natalie have an explanation? Like, what is she saying the reason for the insulin was? So
obviously we have not heard from Natalie like at all. But according to the investigator who interviewed Natalie, again, this was supposed to be about the Ponzi scheme at the time, she's saying that she had cancer, which there's been a lot of questions about whether or not that was like truthful. And I don't really know how that's going to play out in court. Because obviously, like, if she does have cancer or did or something, and she was getting treatment, like that would explain the insulin, because apparently that is a treatment option to help with like.
Really? I never knew this.
Apparently.
Well, my mother-in-law, she had cancer, and I don't know whether she developed diabetes after or before the fact, but.
Well, apparently it's supposed to help with some of the symptoms caused from either like radiation or chemotherapy.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so I'm looking it up while we are talking here. It says insulin potentiation therapy involves administering insulin at the same time as chemotherapy drugs, with the idea that lower chemotherapy doses are then needed because insulin lets more of the drug enter cells. Wow, learn something new every day.
There you go.
Me too.
Yeah, so now I did hear that what is the bodybuilding aspect of this? Was she mentioning that? Pull that mic just a little closer in front of you there.
Cool.
Where did that come in?
So obviously I never knew Michael, but I think a lot of his friends knew that that was kind of an interest of his, that he was very into like health and wellness and bodybuilding, and was taking supplements. He's been accused of taking steroids, and the way that Natalie's defense attorneys have described it is other non-FDA approved drugs or supplements is what he had been known to take.
Right.
So hopefully we'll learn more about that in trial, but that's kind of their strategy, is to say that he wasn't as healthy as we thought he was, that Michael was taking all these supplements, and that is what they're stating as the cause of his death.
Gotcha. Now, Annie, when you were covering this case, what parts specifically did you cover during your time at WVVA?
Well, I actually met with Natalie before it wasn't her time to report for the prison sentence. But at that time, there was a lot of talk going on about potentially, did she kill her husband? Did she not kill her husband? And she was very eager to get her side of the story out to the media.
Mm-hmm. And how long was that interview?
I talked to her. I talked to her for about an hour. She claims that he was mixing insulin with steroids for bodybuilding purposes, and that he had been to the hospital twice before for potential problems related to that. Gotcha.
So was that recorded?
No.
It was not recorded. Yeah. Okay. So it was mentioned then that obviously that would contradict the cancer treatment explanation. So has that officially came into play with the trial?
No. So very few things have been released about kind of the timeline and what the witnesses are going to say. So we just had a very small snippet into kind of what's going to be revealed at trial. There was a hearing. It's called a 404B hearing, and essentially it's to determine what can and can't be talked about during a trial. And one of the things that the defense was arguing was that Natalie Cochran's convictions for money laundering and wire fraud, which is a Ponzi scheme, they did not want those convictions to be brought up during her trial for first-degree murder. They didn't want the jury to know that she has been convicted, that she's in federal prison, none of that. And the prosecution was always like, no, we have to talk about that because that is that's her motive.
Potential motive.
Right, her alleged motive. And so that is how the investigator that's how he got to be giving testimony, is because they had to prove, or I guess present to the judge and say, this is why we want to bring up her past convictions. And so he kind of gave a brief insight into the investigation. And that's how we have some details about what happened. But that's the only snippet that we've really, really gotten into that investigation.
Right. In order to bring 404B evidence into a trial, you have to prove to the judge that it relates to the past crime relates to the current crime. Otherwise, you can't bring it in.
Gotcha. Okay. So, and to boil it down, the prosecutor is saying that allegedly they believe that Michael learned about this scheme, and then that gave, allegedly, Natalie a reason to kill him.
Correct. Okay. That was like her alleged motive behind everything.
Gotcha. And then, so I'm interested in this interview you did with her, Annie. Has she done any recorded interviews, or is it mainly just?
I'm not sure. I've talked to her. She was very interested in trying to get her side of the story out. In fact, she would send text messages and say, "Hey, want to let you know that my next hearing is on such and such date. Would love for you to be there." That's almost unheard of for a reporter to get messages like that from a defendant. But she was that eager to share her side of the story.
Sure. And how many stories, in just a guesstimate, how many stories did you do about this case specifically?
We covered probably every new development, when she was arrested by the feds, when she was sentenced. I didn't cover anything after I was on maternity leave, right after Michael had passed away. So I was kind of taken out of those 3 months in the chatter that followed that.
Gotcha.